Welcome to Rebellious Roots. My name is Sherry Brown, and I'm going to share my story of resilience, racism, and rebellion. I'm telling you the story because all of us have a story that has shaped us and made us who we are. It has shaped our journeys in some way. We've taken these lessons, we've either grown from them or we repeat the cycle over and over again until we learn them. And I want to share some parts of my cycle that I had to break, but also why I'm the rebel of my own life and why this channel is called Rebellious Roots. It starts with my mother. At the age of 19, she was forced into an arranged marriage as an Indian girl born into a culture that shamed women for working in the workplace or having dreams or aspirations of their own. And even though she didn't want to get married, she felt like she was forced into it by her father, who was very emotionally blackmailing. And she married my father, who she barely knew. And for 2 weeks, they knew each other, they got married, but then my father moved to Barbados, which is an island in the Caribbean. My sister and I were born in Barbados. We grew up there. My parents often didn't show love and affection. In our family, we barely said the words, I love you. We barely hugged. There was a lot of shaming. There was a lot of you're getting too dark, you're getting too fat. There was no filter on this generation, this culture. And I was always taught never to talk back, never to go against my parents. I couldn't have any boyfriends. My mother always told me that she's sacrificing her whole life for us. And she was always in a bad mood because she wasn't happy in her own life. And her marriage with my dad was very explosive. They used to fight constantly. We would constantly be hearing plates crashing outside, and we would just sit there and wonder, like, when is this going to end? And we moved a few times back and forth in Barbados. It was a very confusing time for me. And in my culture, divorce is not something that is accepted. It is something that is looked down on because once you're a divorced Indian woman, you will probably never get married again. No one's going to want you. So my parents having this toxic relationship my whole childhood, and then also me trying to deal with having friends living in a predominantly Black country, but going to a private school with so many white girls that I was trying to find my place. I was trying to fit in, and I couldn't find that. I was teased a lot for my color. I was told that I was too hairy. I was told that I was a crybaby too, because I was often very sensitive due to the fact that I was teased and I was bullied, and I just had a lot of emotions. And I really wanted to fit in. I really wanted to be a white girl, so I would bleach my hair blonde. I would shave all over my body, and I had really thick eyebrows, and so that was really hard to deal with as an Indian girl because there's all these stereotypes about us, like being too hairy. Indians have been placed with a lot of ridicule as to their accents, their culture, being called things like curry. Even living in a Black country, I was teased by Black people walking down the street. They would constantly yell out Indian, and it was very derogatory. It made me feel like I didn't fit in there either, and no one really liked my culture. And yeah, there was a few Indians that lived there, but I never really fit in with them either. It felt like a popularity contest with the Indian community because depending on how much money you had, depending if you were fair, then you would be beautiful or taken seriously. And then there was the white people who would always have these popularity cliques, and you didn't know where to go next. So I really didn't know where I was going in Barbados. But when I was 14 years old, my parents decided that, my mother, she decided that she's going to leave my dad and go back and live in India. And of course, I'm 14 years old. My sister at the time was 11. So I thought, all right, I'm going to go to India with my mom. We're going to have a fresh start. We're going to find people that get it. We're going to fit in. We're going to have adventures. And I was on top of the world. I thought this was it. I thought this was my big break. But I was wrong because once I got to India, I did not expect what I saw or felt. It was so polluted, so loud, so much poverty, so crowded, so chaotic. We stayed in an apartment that was 1 bedroom, my sister, my mom, and I. We had no clean drinking water. We had to filter it, boil it, and then use it. And we also didn't have a shower. We didn't have toilet paper. We had to take buckets of water and throw it in our toilet. We had no car. We had to take these rickshaws everywhere with these 80-year-old men pulling you. And we saw a lot of poverty. We saw a lot of kids on the street with no shoes on, just doing the hard work. And we pretty much tried to live the best we could. We had barely any money. I had to work when I was really young and try to do my best to help my mom out. And I got sick a lot. My sister got sick a lot. I had malaria twice. Just trying to survive in that environment was extremely difficult. I didn't know where I was. And again, I was lost. But I knew I had to find my way there. So every day I would try to find my way and I would try to fit in. But again, I didn't fit in because I was considered a dark Indian girl and I was persuaded to use things like Fair and Lovely. Fair and Lovely is a bleaching cream on the market. And apparently it's supposed to make you fairer. So you're more attractive so that, you get better suitors, so that you have more opportunities. You're taken more seriously. And my sister and I would use this, and my mom was fairer, but my dad was darker. So my mom didn't have this problem. And me and my sister were always told that we're getting dark, we're too dark. And I was that girl who would always sit under an umbrella on the beach when I lived in Barbados. I would never go out and get tanned as some people try to do. And it was always something that I hated about myself. I hated my skin color. I hated being a dark Indian girl. And I resented my dad for being dark, making me this color. And so we got treated very differently as darker girls and told by all our aunts and uncles that, we weren't pretty enough, basically. So while I'm in India, I'm facing this colorism. And I can't call it racism because everybody there is Indian, but it was a color thing. And the guys can be dark, the men can be dark, and that's okay. But the women shouldn't be. So that felt like a really big double standard. So I told my mom that when I was 18, I wanted to move back to Barbados. But those 4 years of my life, I had to really learn how to adapt. I went to a school and I learned Hindi. I learned how to read, write, speak. But all of my education dropped away because I was trying to catch up with just learning this language. And so I didn't have a degree or certificate to show for. And I left Barbados way too early to even, gain traction in that. But during that time, I made friends and I started to also talk, walk, dress. I had the accent, everything. Loved Indian food and I still love Indian food. And I tried to embrace the culture as much as I could, and I prayed a lot. I used to walk to this church, which was a Catholic church, and I would light a candle there and I would sit there and I would just pray to God and say, I just want to be happy. I just want you to show me the way. I just want, a husband that loves me so much and kids, and I want a life that I can love and feel fulfilled in. And I just wasn't feeling that when I lived there. And so I had to get through those 4 years of my life. So when I was 18, I packed my bags and I left. And my mother was really sad, but she never really told me that she was. And I didn't feel any guilt. I just wanted to get out of there. I just left, as rebels would do. I went back to Barbados to the man that I resented, my father, because my mother would often say bad things about him. And I started to really think that he was the bad guy and she was good. So now I'm in Barbados and I don't have any degree. I am trying to find a job. I'm trying to fit back in. And one of my childhood friends brought me a bag full of clothes. And she said, here you go. Change your clothes, because I became very Indian. I had a thick accent and my friends were making fun of me, basically telling me that I need to fit back in. I got my tattoo. I got my navel pierced. I started becoming more promiscuous and trying to fit in to that lifestyle. And it was hard, because I still didn't feel like I fit in. And I tried my hardest to, but it felt like the whole popularity contest again. It felt like, well, you don't belong there, you don't belong here, you don't belong here again. So where do you belong? Eventually I found my way to finding a boyfriend and, we dated for a couple years, but then we broke up. And I said, well, I'm moving. I didn't know where I was moving. I just knew I wanted to move. And I told my dad, I said, hey, there's like this place in Canada and I want to move there. And he's like, okay. And I didn't know what I was going to study because I didn't have any kind of certification or degrees. So I told him I wanted to study travel and hospitality because I had been working at the airport for a few years and I loved it. And so that was my in on this country. So I come to Canada in the middle of winter. I'm on the airplane. I'm looking down at the snow and I'm like, this is home. This is home. I'm going to make this home for me. And I get off the airplane and I'm thinking, holy crap, get me back on that plane. I was not used to the winter because in the countries that I lived in, there was no winter. Like it was mostly hot. And so for me, that was a major weather shock. Then I have to go to school here and I'm trying to make new friends. And these friends are white. Everybody's white. And the one thing that surprised me the most was that they were all saying, I love your color. You know, we try so hard to tan, go to these tanning beds. And meanwhile, we just want your color. And I was surprised because I'm thinking, wow, like this whole time I'm hating the color of my skin. And these people are saying that they want my color. So that was strange. And also, it took me a while to kind of get used to loving myself the way I am. It took a while. So I'm in Canada. I have no friends, but I'm making friends. I want to become a permanent resident of Canada and I start, working here. I worked in a travel agency here, and then I finally met my husband, and we met on MySpace. MySpace is, I don't know if many of you are as old as I am, but I'm pretty old. MySpace was like a music channel where people connected. It wasn't a dating site, but he was moving to where I was moving, and we dated, and 3 months later, we moved in together. I became a permanent resident. We got married. We have 3 kids. I started 2 very successful businesses, and my life has been so blessed. We have a house, and I think that my story of resilience has shaped me into being the woman I am today, being so passionate about helping other women stand into their power, build resilience, be the rebel of their lives, understand the truth about who they are despite where they come from, their background, their cultural experiences, the color of their skin. None of that matters. And that is the story of how Rebellious Roots came about. And I hope this video was not too long-winded. And I hope you follow the channel for more mindset strategies that I've learned throughout my life. I really want to go on this journey with you. I want you to come on this journey with me because I see you. I see what you're going through. I see the struggles you've gone through in your life. You have a story to share. And sometimes we just need to be vulnerable enough to share that with others, to be okay with where we come from, and to recognize that those things have only made us wiser in the end. So thank you for coming on this video, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.